As I told in the last episode, that with the advent of Britishers, i.e., when they won Kangra, with Kangra, Kullu also became under Britishers. The title of the Kullu kings were changed to Roy. Ajit Singh remained Roy of Kullu 1840 to 1846. Roy Thakur Singh remained Roy of Kullu 1846 to 1852. Roy Dilip Singh remained Roy of Kullu from 1852 to 1869. Roy Dilip Singh remained Roy from 1869 to 1892. Roy Bahadur Beg Singh remained Roy of Kullu 1892 to 1921. Roy Bahadur Bhagwant Singh remained from 1921 to 1960. After India became independent in 15 August 1947, again the title was changed to King, and Mahendra Singh remained King of Kullu 1989, and after 1989 Maheshwar Singh is still King of Kullu. As such, when Kullu became under Britishers, they started settling down in Kullu after they took it over from the Sikhs in 1846, headed by an assistant commissioner. Kullu at that time was a subdivision under Kangra district. The early settlers were a mixed bag. Many of wanted to explore the Himalayas and experiment, especially in horticulture. Others wished to live in peace, and there were some who just came for hunting. Soon, a good number of Britishers spread all over the valley after having bought big chunks of land and built palatial houses in the following decades. And by 1880, around a dozen estates of British settlers had come up in Bajaura, Raisan, Bandrol, Dobhi, Nagar, Jagatsukh, and Manali. Some of the prominent settlers at that time included Colonel R.H.F. Rennick, who owned the Gar estate in Bajaura and the Hall estate in Nagar. Willie Donald, who lived in Dobie estate near Raisan and later founded Kutbai estate in Nagar. Captain R.C. Lee, who owned an estate in Bandrol village, and Captain A.T. Bannon, who set up an estate in Manali. There were no roads, and you could come to Kullu only on foot or riding mule. The valley was verdant land, fertile and life simple, and there was so much to explore and to be discovered. Life indeed was beautiful in the valley. Major Hay, who was the first Assistant Commissioner Kullu, had first planted a tea garden in Nagar. The garden was bought and improvised improvised upon by his successor G. Knox, who founded the Kullu Tea Company in the 1860s. The company brought land in other parts of the valley, and soon there were tea gardens spread in Bajora, Raisan, and Nagar. The gardens were managed by H. J. Minikin, who used to stay in Raisan. However, the tea company did not do well, mainly due to the fact that the climate didn't turn out to be the best suited for the tea cultivation, and the company was dissolved in 1880, and land was bought by Minikin and Colonel R.H.F. Rennick. The first apple orchard, even though credit for introducing apple farming in Himachal goes to Satyanand Stokes. What if we go through the work of some British authors, especially Penelope Chitbodi, who wrote Kullu, The End of Inhabitable World, and A.F.P. Harcourt, who served as the Assistant Commissioner of Kullu from 1869 to 1871. It became clear that Kullu had apple farm in 1870s, at least 40 years before Stokes started apple cultivation in Shimla district. Chitbodi had written in her book that Captain R.C. Lee was the pioneer of apple cultivation. Harcourt has also mentioned in his book The Himalayan District of Kullu, Lahore and Spiti, published in 1871, about Lee's estate in Kullu. According to Penelope, Lee, after retiring from army, had settled down in Bandrol village, some 12 kilometers from Kullu on Manali National Highway, and started apple cultivation among other fruits in 1870. Some years later, Captain A.T. Bannon, after retiring from the Royal Munster Fusiliers, a regiment of the British Army, settled down in Manali after buying land. Like Lee, Bannon too started the apple farming, and his decision was also followed by many other settlers in the valley and eventually by the locals. And there was Willie Donald, who was one of the most successful fruit growers and also who started apple farming Dobie and later founded the Kutbai state in Nagar. Willie was also an expert engineer and in charge of roads and bridges in the entire Kulu subdivision. A publicity pamphlet on fruits, including apple by Billy Donald, who owned a estate in Dovi and Nagar. According to Chitbodi, some of the apple varieties that were grown in Kullu, including Cox, Blenheim, Orange, Newton, and Rosette. As the apple orchard grew in numbers, so did the supply. But there was one bottleneck in selling the produce to the outside world: lack of transportation. In the initial days of apple farming, apple used to be carried to Shimla using the mail runners. Chitbodi writes in her book that the mail runners did 6 miles stages carrying 5 parcels packed into their kiltas. The locals all purpose cone shaped baskets. At the heights of the fruit season, as many as 200 runners were employed at each stages, and by the relay system, the first 90 miles of the journey were covered in under 24 hours. Hunting games. Kullu at that time was also a favorite hunting ground, hunting ground, and many Britishers come to the valley searching for good game. They would camp in the forests for days and hunt along along the rivulets. R.H. Tyake was one of themselves, them who came with her husband to the valley and started living at the estate of Minikan in Raisan, a scenic village on the bank of Byas River and located some 14 kilometers from Kullu towards Manali. Tyake traveled all over the valley and in the neighboring Lahols and Spiti, and whenever they had time, they went into the forest and even up to Hamta Pass for hunting bears and ibex. She also written a book chronicling adventures, how I shot my bears, or 2 years tent life in Kullu and Lahore. In the book, published in 1893, Tyake throws an interesting light on the Kullu and Lahore of that time. People and their customs, besides focusing on their life, which was full of adventure as they trekked all over the western Himalayas and put themselves in many dangerous situations while hunting. She has also given interesting details in the book about how Sahibs would fight with each other for the Nalas. The Tyakes spent the last 2 years of their in Arcadia house in Nagar, and both died within a week of each other. They were buried side by at side at Nagar. By the time the country got independence in 1947, most British settlers, except few, had already sold their estates and left the valley for England. According to Penelope Chitbody, it was less to do with coming of Indian independence and more to do with the change in the life pattern of settlers brought about by the beginning transport age in Kullu some 20 years earlier in around 1920. What really broke up this little sporting and farming community was not so much the coming of independence in 1947 as the opening of the Mandi Large Gorge Road some 20 years earlier. Up till then, the Kullu Valley could be reached only on foot or by riding a hill pony up and down precipitous path. At once, the buses and lorries and private cars started pouring in and transforming Kullu into a popular holiday resort like Kashmir. The whole pattern of life changed for the residents, writes Penelope in the book. Colonel RHF Rennick sold the whole estate to the Raja of Mundi in 1921, and soon after Gar estate in Bajora, Willie Donald died in 1944 and left his two daughters, Barbara and Hilary, the Dobhi State Kutbai estate. The daughter sold the Dobhi estate in 1945 and the Kutbai estate in 1952, but there were still very few like C.R. Johnson and Bannon family members who never went back, and their family continued to live in the valley. Thank you.